Let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to Boxing Unwrapped. It's Boxing Unwrapped, the boxing podcast that's more controversial than Michael Conlan's walk-in music. I'm Ryan.
I'm not sure we are more controversial. I don't think we're likely to undo 25 years of peace talks through our podcast.
Well, we cross the sectarian divide, so it's okay.
We do. We go back and forth, don't we?
We do.
Peacefully. And we do it with peace.
Exactly. We don't even need a peace wall.
I'm Andrew. Did I say that?
No, you didn't. You're just saying it now.
Oh, it's going to be one of these episodes.
It's one of these episodes, guys. It's going to be a good one. It's a hot topic that I think all of you have been waiting for us to cover. So, Andy, do you want to tell the good people what we have in store for them this week?
I do, but I don't know whether any of the things you said are true. This week, he is in the media quite a lot, and he's normally saying something that both delights and aggravates, depending on your review. But this week we're looking at who the F is Carl Froch.
Ooh.
To be honest, I can't really understand. I can't really remember why we decided to do this. But yeah, he is obviously quite a prominent figure within the kind of boxing community. So we'll delve into looking at his personal life and his amateur and his professional career, and establish just where he sits within boxing's echelons, whether he sits at the top, the middle, or the bottom, and just how controversial is he really?
So, without further ado, let's dive right into this week's main topic, which is who the F is Carl Froch?
He was quite good, was he?
Well, yeah, it was alright. I heard he beat someone in front of 80,000 at Wembley once.
Did you look? I'll send you this. But did you look on his Wikipedia page? Was this you actually? Now I'm thinking about this. Did you change this on his Wikipedia page?
What? No, what did it say?
Under the section where it's got, there's like a little box on the right hand side of the page where it's just got like a kind of career summary for each of the boxers. What do you call it? Like when there's a box within a page of text.
Like a table.
Yeah, is there not like a kind of thing when it's within an article you have a box which has got then like a table and some information? There's like a specific journal name for it. Is there not?
Like text box?
Text box, right. Anyway, that worked well. Under his boxing record for total fights, instead of saying 35, someone's changed it to say 80,000 at Wembley.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like a sidebar. The little sidebar at the top is a little profile. It says 80,000 at Wembley. I think no one has changed it. I think that's absolutely fucking cracking. Like, not even the Wikipedia people have jumped onto this yet.
Well, it's sort of the thing you could easily miss. It's quite good. It wasn't you, was it?
It wasn't me. I wish it was. I wish I could take fucking credit for that. All of this came out because we were talking about it because actually, he does these theoretical I would destroy X and X and X, and we kind of thought actually would he? And there was a bit of a catalyst because I put a bit of a spicy meme up on the Facebook page at the weekend of him and Anthony Joshua saying as he walked away he said AJ's a nice guy but I would have destroyed him in front of 80,000 at Wembley obviously it kind of blew up because everyone gets that because he just seems to throw that into every conversation he possibly can. So we thought, well, let's maybe talk about, was he actually any good? So I mean, really, who is Carl Froch? His early life, a bit fractured. His dad was actually in and out of prison when he was quite young.
Really?
Yeah. The first kind of 3 years of Carl Froch's life, his dad was in and out of prison until he was actually in prison and trained as a joiner. And that kind of put the guy onto a more stable life path than his kind of minor criminality of like robbing places and stuff. He in one interview he kind of mentioned like one of his earliest memories was like mentioning to his mum like, where was that place that we went and visited Dad, and it had all these like glass tables and stuff. And she was like, I can't believe you remember, you were crying, I was crying, and I can't remember where it was. And she was like, I can't believe you remember that. It's actually visiting your dad in prison.
Ooh, harsh.
Yeah, so obviously relatively humble beginnings, but he did actually take up the sport of boxing at a very young age.
He did, so he should have flawless technique by our reckoning, should he?
Well, maybe not.
Blown our theory out of the water.
Totally. So he was actually at the age of 9 when he started boxing, and he had his first fight at the age of 11.
It was in front of 8,000 at Wembley.
It was, yeah. He scored a second round knockout over a guy named Jason Booth. It was the first. He was the first 11-year-old to fight at Wembley, actually. But he did have a pretty decent amateur career. He was the ABA middleweight champion in 1999 and 2001. But he has actually mentioned that when he was young, when he was an amateur, he actually had a bit of a fear of fighting. He was overcome with nerves. And once he was in, he said he was fine, but the kind of bit beforehand was very difficult for him. He actually said that it was hooking up with Rob McCracken that changed it all for him, because Rob McCracken helped change his mindset, and he trusts him with every decision in boxing. He did quite well in his amateur career. He was the first ever British boxer to win a medal at the Senior World Championships.
He won a bronze in 2001.
Yeah. And 2000 he won in the European Championships, and then 2001 he won a World Championship bronze medal. So off the back of that, apparently he wasn't actually going to go pro. He like ummed and ahed over it for a very long time in it, and eventually he kind of succumbed to it and said to Rob McCracken, like, I will now turn pro. Which, I guess we have Rob McCracken to thank. And
he stayed with him his entire career, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
He had quite a good relationship with him, and that, of course, is now AJ's trainer. Yeah,
exactly. Which says a lot about the kind of pedigree Rob McCracken has. He is a good trainer.
He's good at picking him, certainly.
He's good, certainly, yeah. Well, and you know who's a massive fan of Carl Froch?
Carl Froch.
Barry McGuigan.
Oh, really?
So Barry McGuigan saw him at the age of 11 and said, that boy is incredible. He's got such strength and resilience for a boy of his age. He said that to Carl Froch's mother, and his mother actually said, well, like, I will hold that against you when he's a future world champion. And he goes on to do it, and Barry McGuigan always speaks very highly of Carl Froch. Do you want to talk a bit about his kind of early professional career on his way up to becoming the kind of British champion?
Not really. Well, I mean, it's not going to be very interesting. Nothing very exciting happened. So he debuted at 25 years old in terms of professional career, and then he just did the kind of, the very sort of routine, expected pathway through like building your record. Yeah. So he went through the sequence where he first became English, Commonwealth, and then British champion. That was the sequence that he did. He seemed to skip out European and went straight to the kind of world title level. But it was all very like either one-sided points decisions or primarily it was knockouts. Yeah. And it was at this point he was like establishing himself as a big hitter. He was a very powerful puncher, and he kind of made fairly like routine and fairly smooth progress through the ranks to build up to the world title shots that he eventually got. And he got his first world title shot in his 23rd fight. So he got there in a pretty kind of normalish time.
Well,
I would say.
What I find interesting about it actually is when he actually got the British super middleweight title, the Lonsdale belt, it was vacant, right? And then when he actually wins his first world title, again, it's a vacant title. So in both of these, he didn't have to unseat someone in order to win them. And the really interesting thing about when he gets the vacant WBC super middleweight title is, do you know why it was vacant?
Because Calzaghe retired.
Calzaghe vacated it.
He vacated to go to light heavy.
Yeah, exactly. To go do his like swan song of super fights.
Swan song, super fight, super cash. Yeah.
There was like loads of a big call for Calzaghe to face Froch. Froch actually like there's a great quote where he's like, "I will wipe the floor with Joe Calzaghe. I will end him." Right? Like. And like whispers in front of 80,000 people at Wembley, but like and from like the kind of story around it is basically like Joe Calzaghe was like, this guy is not a big enough name for me to fight in front of. Like I need to make I can sell out stadiums all over the world. There's absolutely no point I should be fighting Carl Froch, and it's kind of one of those fights that actually. I think Carl Froch was quite lucky that it didn't happen. Because
I would not have given him much prospect of beating Calzaghe.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I think that if he had fought Calzaghe, it probably would have been the last we heard of Carl Froch.
Well, it would have certainly like established him within the kind of hierarchy of British super middles. He'd have had a chance, I think, Ryan, because he's such a big puncher.
And he's got a granite chin.
We can talk about it a bit more later, but if they had like all the different types of granite available to choose for chin, and Carl Froch's got like first dibs,
Totally.
It's just like ridiculous.
Absolutely, it's crazy. But yeah, he wins his WBC belt against Jean Pascal. That much well heard about Canadian super middleweight.
What a fight it was as well. What a fight.
It was a great fight actually.
It was a total brawl. It was a total brawl where they were just like punching lumps out of each other and showing like no mercy, but never taking a backward step, even though they were getting the shit kicked out of them. Yeah. He, apparently, I don't know if you saw this, but going into the fight from his final sparring session in the build-up to it, Froch had a perforated eardrum and a cracked rib, and was given the option to withdraw from the fight, but refused to. He's like, "No, I'm not withdrawing. I'm going to fight and I'm going to win." And he did.
And then he then fought Andre Durrell.
Should we talk about Jermaine Taylor?
Yeah, he then fought Jermaine Taylor. He is a friend of the podcast. Good old Jermaine.
He doesn't know it.
He does. He certainly does not know it. But like, seriously, like, it's relatively impressive that he beats Jermaine Taylor, because Jermaine Taylor at the time,
and the manner in which he beats him is like beyond Hollywood. So for anyone that's not seen this, then you should look at highlights, if not watching the full thing. He is behind on the cards, after having been knocked down in the third round versus Taylor.
Yeah, and he gets absolutely rocked by Taylor in the third round, like really rocked.
Put down. So Froch has been knocked down twice in his career, and both times he's been knocked down, it's on the seat of his pants. He tends to not like go down any other way. He just kind of like sits down, has a little rest, and then gets up and starts swinging again. But anyway, so the first half of the fight, Taylor was kind of in control, and Froch did come back and start to land more and more in the second half. But anyway, he's behind on the judges' scorecards. I think it was two out of the 3 cards. Anyway, he's behind against Taylor. I remember it was all 3 cards, I think.
Yeah.
And with 14 seconds left in the fight, he stops Taylor after having knocked him down a little bit before, and then Taylor gets back up to continue. 14 seconds less to last, but the referee is totally right to stop it. He couldn't have taken 14 more seconds of that, but even though he was so close to winning. But I mean, it's proper like a Hollywood ending.
Yeah.
And at this point, Froch should be like the biggest star in the UK. He should be like, this is like, beyond amazing what he's done in terms of like, he should have so much notoriety, but he's relatively unknown at this point in 2009.
Which is very, very interesting about it as well, because he, for whatever reason, did not capture the public's attention earlier in his career at all. So it's very important to remember that if we went back in our time machine to this point and asked people who is Carl Froch, they'd be like, I don't know, what is that noise you're making? Do you have a cold?
Is his name? So
his father is German,
Polish.
That's it. Polish.
I think it's his grandparents. So I think his parents were born in the UK as well, but I think his paternal grandparents were Polish, which I think is where the name comes from, though.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think. So yeah, because it's quite an unusual name. But anyway, yeah. Interesting point though about how basically no one knew who he was at that point. I read a little bit about this, and so his career. So we said he was with the same coach the whole time, Rob McCracken. But his career was split promotionally, where he was promoted by Mick Hennessy up until 2011, and then he was promoted by Matchroom the Hearns after 2011.
Yeah.
We're talking just now where he's just put on like this total Hollywood ending to retain his WBC super middleweight in the US against Jermaine Taylor, and that's 2009. At which point, still no one knows who he is. Yeah. So anyway, I read a little bit, and Froch said this when his relationship with Hennessy came to an end. And he went to Matchroom. He said, I've been self-promoting for ages, to be honest. I no longer work with my representative, Mick Hennessy. I'm going it alone. The relationship went wrong in a lot of areas. It's in the hands of the lawyers. I'm having to do it myself now, and I'm a lot better off. And then this was interesting, I thought. This is what, after he linked up with Matchroom, this is what your pal Eddie said. Carl Froch is a world-class fighter, yet no one outside his own living room knows who he is, and that can't be right. I think Carl needs our type of promotion. He's a rare commodity as a world-class fighter coming from England, and frankly, we don't have that many world-class fighters in England. Yeah, that's kind of a bit like pointless, because he says he's a rare commodity, he's a world-class fighter coming from England, and then he says we don't have that many world-class fighters from England. So he's just basically saying the same thing at the start and end of the sentence. But Eddie's got a bit more polish these days. He wouldn't make that kind of mistake. Sorry, bit off the point.
Well, I mean,
it's interesting.
It's because he wasn't really being shown on television. So, his fight against Jean Pascal was only shown on, like, the fringe satellite channel primetime.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so, it wasn't pay-per-view, it wasn't Sky or anything, it was just, it was on a fringe channel.
Yeah. I was going to say, so obviously he came on board with Matchroom, and then that's obviously tied up with Sky. But then if we skip forward a little bit, where he's had defenses, he's been involved in high profile fights. So I think we spoke about this like many pods ago, Ryan. Back in the old days. He had 2 fights in 2013 that were both on Sky Box Office. And so the first one was a rematch against Mikkel Kessler. He lost the first fight against Mikkel Kessler in, I think it was 2010.
Yeah,
and that was like a classic fight, and as part of the ridiculously named Super 6 series.
Yeah,
which no one really understood what the fuck was going on with it. But it was the first attempt at a boxing tournament. And they kind of totally
do you know what he blames to his loss against Mikkel Kessler?
The fact they fought abroad.
No. The Icelandic volcano eruption. So
Right.
when he was supposed to...
Did he elaborate on that any?
So when he was supposed to fly out for the Mikkel Kessler fight was like a week before the fight was taking place. And then they had this Icelandic volcano erupt. Grounded all the flights across Europe. So he couldn't get across, right? So like it looked like the fight was going to be cancelled. So like he took his foot completely off the gas like the week before fight week. Even had like a barbecue with his family and drank and stuff. And his weight started going back up. And then like it all like happened that they could charter a private flight. So he actually went against Rob McCracken's advice, who said like just fucking pull out. You can pull out, it'll be fine. But he went ahead with the fight, and he said that that psychologically affected him so much that he lost the fight.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that is interesting. I mean, I find it hard to believe that for something as high profile as that, they couldn't find a way charter a flight, or you can go like a ferry. It's Denmark. It's not like the Easter Islands or something.
Yeah,
it's
we're
not
talking about fucking Carl Froch here, right? He doesn't know where Denmark is, right? You couldn't point to Denmark on a map.
It's really not very far away, distance wise. You could take a ferry to Holland and then drive round. I don't know. There are plenty of options if you have several weeks' notice. You can get to Denmark. It's not that difficult. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think I've kind of gone off the point. The point I was going to make was, even though he'd had this classic fight the first time around, which as you've said, he lost because he had a barbecue and a volcano in 2010, the rematch of this fight that was almost definitely going to be like a brilliant fight in 2013 was on Sky Box Office and was paid for by a rather paltry 32,000 people. It's nothing.
It's nothing. It is absolutely nothing. 32,000 buys on pay-per-view.
And then his next fight, the first fight versus Groves, was 47,000 buys on Sky Box Office. So, you've got an indication as to his popularity. It's basically minimal. Those are pretty shocking figures. And then obviously the rematch versus Groves was 355,000, so 9 times the buys. And to be honest, I'm surprised it's not more than that, because I think we spoke about it before, but the rematch felt like it was something that properly kind of captured and had the really big kind of crossover appeal.
Yeah, especially because the first fight ended in such a controversial way. So
yeah, that definitely helped. It was perfect for the rematch.
It was perfect for the rematch. I mean, Carl Froch was even booed out of the stadium the first time round because it was controversial. So for our listeners who didn't know, when he fought Groves the first time, Groves actually put Froch on his arse, and Froch was dazed for a large proportion of the fight because of this. And then he actually kind of knocks Groves out on his feet a little bit, and rather than allowing Groves to try and recover, Howard Foster actually jumped in the 9th round
and stops it.
Yeah, while Groves was ahead on all 3 judges' scorecards. So so obviously that captured the nation's attention, and because you had this kind of all British bout with and the animosity between these two boys is palpable. I mean, unbelievable. They didn't just put it on for the cameras. They fucking hated each other.
They did.
They really did.
I think Froch thought Groves was unworthy. He was just like a kind of gobshite, mouthy guy, and he hadn't proven himself in the same way that Froch by that point had, been there and done it all. He'd fought the best, and he'd fought everyone. He'd fought abroad lots of times, etc., etc. Multiple world champion, etc. And he thought Groves was just like a sort of gobby upstart. And he says that the first fight he didn't take very seriously. It's a bit of a theme, isn't it?
Yeah.
He said he didn't take the first fight seriously enough, and he didn't really rate Groves, and he didn't do enough, and he wasn't in the right kind of mind frame as well for the fight, and that was why he started slowly and why he got put in his arse in the first round.
He actually saw a psychiatrist during the camp of the second fight to try and deal with his anger and hatred towards George Groves. To put it in in a more peaceful way in his mind, so it didn't affect him as much.
That's interesting.
And because he's such a prick, right? He says that actually, all his demons against George Groves were let out when he knocked him square out by hitting his jaw, and seeing him hit the floor in front of 80,000 people at Wembley. He actually says that. He says, once I did that, everything was absolutely fine. I didn't hate George Groves anymore.
It was catharsis, was it? It was
such.
Oh, well.
He's actually one of those people that when you see him speak on camera, he becomes more dislikable. How there's some people who you kind of dislike, but then you see them on camera and you're a bit actually, do you know what? They're all right. With Carl Froch, you're actually fuck, he's actually worse the more you watch him. He's quite he's sort of reasonably polished, but he's just kind of vacuous with it. And you can tell that he's incapable of giving an unqualified compliment to someone. He is good, but he is good. However, and it's I think it stems from insecurity. I'm sure he's very insecure, and that's where it comes from. I think he is.
We've kind of skipped a bit out of his career, which we need to go back to. But
yeah,
I watched this little clip just while we're talking about it, and Andre Ward got asked about Froch, who obviously fought and was the only man to comprehensively and for it to be unrevenged defeat of Carl Froch. He's the only man to have done it, and he did it pretty. Not easily, but clearly and definitively beat Froch because Ward was the boy.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was asked. I think it's a relatively recent clip. He was asked, "What do you think about Froch's comments regarding De Gale, etc.?" And Andre Ward, he's a pretty cool guy. How he comes across, he comes across very likable on camera, and he's I feel bad for a man. I feel bad for Froch, and it's why do you feel bad for him? Well, because, he doesn't realise he's got all this, anger. He doesn't realise he doesn't need to say these things. And he basically says that Froch isn't, self-aware enough to know that it doesn't diminish his achievements any to pay other fighters, his competitors, his rivals, kind of unreserved compliments.
Yeah.
He doesn't realise that he can do that. So Ward's really cool.
Yeah, totally. And I think we should probably have a little time talking about his fight against Andre Ward, because Andre Ward was the fucking business, right? There is no ifs, ands, or buts. Andre Ward was the boy at super middleweight, absolutely unstoppable.
Yeah, he was the boy.
And when Carl Froch fought Andre Ward, he got his ass handed to him.
He did a little
bit. Did.
Yeah. I think he couldn't work him out. Ward's a cerebral fighter, and he knew how to nullify Froch. He beat him to the punch all the time. He fought the fight on his terms.
Yeah.
At his distance, at his pace, and Froch was kind of helpless to sort of change the direction. It went to points, but I thought Ward kind of eased off a little bit in the latter stages, so it looked closer on points than it actually was. But I remember, I think I talked about this in a previous episode, Froch said, off the record apparently to someone, that he'd been given an absolute fucking schooling and he was never going near Andre Ward again.
Totally. And I would caveat, right, that if we look through Carl Froch's record, right, Andre Ward was really the only world beater he fought.
I have to strongly disagree with that.
Who else would you put into that camp?
Well, it depends how you're defining like world class. Like they're all established champions. Like Taylor was, Andre Durrell was, but definitely the most prominent one I would put in, who's also one of the best of his generation, was Kessler.
Well, yeah, I suppose
I'd give him definitely Kessler, and then Groves to an extent as well. Groves, but definitely Kessler. But I know that was 1-1. I know you won one and lost one against Barbecues and Volcanoes Society. Won one and lost one against.
Yeah, and I guess Kessler did actually get into the ring with Joe Calzaghe. To be fair,
he did. He got beaten, but
but
then against so did everyone else.
So did anybody that fought Joe Calzaghe. Didn't have a hope in hell. But I don't think that Carl Froch is as good a boxer as Carl Froch thinks that Carl Froch is good a boxer. I think that the reason that we're talking about Carl Froch today is because he has a symbiotic relationship with Mr. George Groves. George Groves made Carl Froch who he was.
I think in terms of a wider perception or a wider notoriety, I agree with you.
I don't think that unless he did beat George Groves in front of 80,000 people at Wembley, we would not be doing this podcast, because we would be asking a very different question, which is, who the F actually was Carl Froch? Does anyone remember this man?
I think there's before Groves, I think there was a good chance that, I agree with you, he would have been like the most successful, least known British boxer of like the last however many years, because I agree that's what defined his career. Although really, I mean, the Kessler fight should have done, because they were like super high level, and the way that Froch fought should have lent himself to notoriety.
Absolutely, because
such an exciting fighter.
Balls to the wall, don't care if I get hit. Absolutely, I was watching an interview with him, and he said one of the things that really got him into boxing was Naseem Ahmed, and the way that he fought with his hands down and stuck his jaw out and stuff. And Carl Froch does that, but he just gets hit in the face while doing it. Whereas Naseem Ahmed would move, Carl Froch just stays there and waits to get punched in the face.
This is the thing, because Froch is he's not a very refined or elegant looking boxer, and he has a somewhat porous defense. But he's only been beaten twice, and he's only lost unavenged once. He for what other else criticisms you have of him, he can punch incredibly hard, and he is a granite constructed face, and is willing to take an enormous amount of abuse with seemingly minimal impact. Yeah. I mean, he is tough as fucking nails. You cannot, for other criticisms, you cannot doubt his grit. I mean, he is as tough as they come.
Oh, totally, absolutely. I think it's quite interesting, and there's probably one thing that we should mention about Mr. Carl Froch that we haven't mentioned.
Go on.
He appeared on Dancing on Ice.
What?
He appeared on Dancing on Ice in 2013. So
honestly?
Yeah. I know how this is how good we do research, guys, right? But he actually was on Dancing on Ice, which for our US listeners is it's like an ice dancing program where they have celebrities come on to do ice dancing.
Can any of our US listeners, if they would like to send a Facebook message or an email to us just with the words "duh" and address it to Ryan, you'd be very welcome.
Yeah, totally. But he had to leave the dancing competition because he hurt his lower back.
Bless.
But
So it's weird though, because he should have been at this point. I'm just thinking 2013 he was on it, you're saying?
yeah. So I think it was between the fights.
Between the Kessler and the Groves
Yeah,
fight.
yeah.
And at this point he was he was voted the fighter of the year. World Boxing News and BoxRec both had him as the fighter of the year, like it's globally fighter of the year in 2012. And he was voted GQ Sportsman of the Year for the UK. In when was that? In 2013.
Yeah.
So he should have been incredibly famous, but it just did not translate to anyone watching his fights.
No.
Or anyone paying to watch his fights in a totally different way. Maybe it's a different era, but in a totally different way than from a very early stage, the level of popularity that Joshua has.
Yeah.
But so if you think about how, maybe this is a point about, we're going off topic a bit, but how the landscape has shifted, because we talked about like the White Chisora or White Parker fights, which were about 400,000 buys, I think, weren't they? And Froch Groves 2 was 355,000. So, but that seemed much more kind of momentous an occasion, I think.
Yes.
Back in the day, I don't know. It's funny though. Maybe I think the various people, the Herons, have managed to like shift the landscape in terms of the like normalizing pay-per-view buying, maybe.
Well, yeah. I mean, we went into our why the F there's so many pay-per-views episode, but like it's because the model has changed now, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And it's just they have to do them. They have to make them good. Yeah. I think I'm just trying to think what else we need to say. Yes, other notable victories. Andre Durrell, he beat on points. We talked about him beating Jermaine Taylor. He beat an already at that point diminishing Arthur Abraham. Lost comprehensively, as we said, to Andre Ward. Demolished Lucien Butte, and in that fight, that was to win the IBF belt. That was before the Kessler rematch, but he won in 5, and he was a very unfancied underdog going into that fight. People thought Butte was going to beat him and beat him good, and he took Butte apart. So it was a recurring theme that up until he was a favourite for the Groves fights, but a lot of the fights he had before that, when he was competing at world level, he was always underestimated. People thought, nah, he's not going to win. He's not going to win, but he always did. Apart from Ward and Kessler.
Yeah. So, right, let's maybe wrap this up with one final question, Andy. Carl Froch, overrated or underrated?
It's a good question. I'm assuming you just want me to say one of the two options, but it won't surprise you. What I would say is this. I think if you look at, and I looked through for the past like 30 odd years, 25, 30 years, you're looking at the super middleweight champions.
Yeah.
I would say he was definitely not as good as Calzaghe.
Nope.
But then going back before that, who's the next kind of great that fought at super middle? And then you're back into the mid-90s and our friend of the show, Roy Jones Jr.
Yep.
He definitely nowhere near as good as him. But I think since then, you've had Andre Ward, who's definitely better than him, as was demonstrated when they fought. And then I think you're struggling to definitively say there's been a better super middleweight since then. I certainly am not convinced you can find one. I think he's proven to be better than the kind of the more recent crop, the De Gales, the Groves, the Badu Jacks. I think he would be better than all of those. Whether or not by the end of his career we would look back on someone like our giant super middleweight friend Callum Smith.
He's just so big.
But he is so big. But he's obviously he's far too early in his career We need to see what kind of legacy he leaves.
Yeah.
But I think from the current and recent crop of super middles, I think Froch is better than them all. So he'll go down as one of the best super middles of the past couple of decades, aside from Andre Ward and Calzaghe. Third. So I'm putting him third in the noughties. That was a very long way of saying that.
Yeah. Personally, for me, I would say underrated boxer, overrated as a person.
That was much more succinct.
Yeah, it was indeed. Right, guys, on that note, we'll just wrap up and say, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And watch out for next week's episode because it is going to be a banger. But with that in mind, it's goodbye from me, Ryan.
And goodbye from me, Andrew.